Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Hello everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Crystal, and I want to thank all of you for being with us today, whether it's your first episode with me or you've tuned in for some of the other ones that we've had out. I'm so excited to bring you today's episode, and I can't wait to tell you all about it. Now, in the other episodes that we had, we did get pretty scientific. We talked a lot about some articles that we found, different ways of coping with happiness in life, some really good de-stressing techniques as well, and a lot of wonderful retreats around the world that you can go to experience some levels of happiness, to find yourself, to experience the beauty that other people have to offer. But this time I think for today's episode, we're gonna just take it down a notch. We're gonna take a step back and slow down and relax a little bit, So what we're gonna do today is I'm going to talk to you about some feel-good stories, some short inspirational quotes that I found, some poems, and some really interesting short stories that could hopefully inspire you to not only be your best self, but also maybe it could get you through a hard time, or it could elevate your mood even further up, right? So let's get started. So sometimes poems, we're just gonna kind of wing it a little bit. We might go back and forth between poems and stories, but I think this is a really good start to have as our introduction. So sometimes poems about life make you stop in your tracks and think, yes, okay? To live content with small means, to seek elegance rather than luxury, and refinement rather than fashion, to be worthy, not respectable, and wealthy, not rich. To study hard, think quietly, talk gently, act frankly, to listen to stars and birds, to babes and sages, with open heart, to bear all cheerfully, to all bravely await occasions, hurry never. In a word, to let the spiritual unbidden and unconscious grow up through the common. This is to be my symphony. And this poem was written by William Henry Channing. He lived from 1810 until 1884, based out of London, and he had 2 children. 1 child, I apologize. Now, William Henry Channing was according to Wiki, he was an American Unitarian, clergyman, writer, and philosopher. And he also did write the famous poem, or rather book, called My Symphony. And this was discussing how to live content with small means, to seek elegance rather than luxury, and refinement rather than fashion. So if you guys do get the chance to check out that book, let me know. I at some point might do a podcast on this. I think it would be interesting. But if you guys have anyone that's read this, please feel free to message us on Facebook, Twitter, anything like that. I would love to hear from you. Now, one of my favorite inspirational poems is another wonderful collection of motivational words, and it goes like this. Go into this week with the attitude that your peace, your health of mind, your heart mean more than getting everything else done, that your smile matters, that feeling rested matters, that holding the hand of your loved ones matter. So pause lots, function at a pace that doesn't pull you apart. Honor the things that make you feel good inside, the things that make you feel alive. Give time to those things this week. Make time the gift it is by giving it to what really matters to you. And this was a poem by S.C. Laurie of the book Butterflies and Pebbles. Now, this woman, S.C. Laurie, does have a few other publications as well, a Facebook page, as well as what appears to be an Etsy page, which could be a selection for unique custom hand pieces, journals, notebooks, and such. So we've just opened with two really fantastic poems to kind of set us up for this first segment. And now I'm just going to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to delve into some short inspirational stories. Okay, I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this and bring this to you. I think that even just listening to something happy or really giving something a little bit more thought that's not just such a dialect of like factual information. I think being able to process other means of life and happiness and other areas of art and well-being is good for the soul. So this one is called Happy Dervish. Once a Shah was riding in his palanquin through the town. That's palanquin, not pelican, of course. Looking through the window at the scurrying people. Suddenly, he saw a lonely dervish sitting in the middle of the crowd, who was smiling and looking happy about something. The dervish was dressed poorly, and except the saucer for handouts and a road script he had nothing else beside him. The Shah rode past him and soon forgot what he saw. After a few days, the Shah had to go the same way again, where he saw the same dervish again, completely happy, dozing with blissfully closed eyes. The next day, Shah chose the same way on purpose, to see if the dervish will be in his place, and again, the image was the same. Intrigued, Shah was going the same way almost every day, and every time he found the dervish in the same spirit. Finally, unable to stand it anymore, Shah came out from the palanquin and addressed the imperturbable, I don't think I've ever said that word before, dervish with these words. Why are you always smiling? Almost every day I see you here, and it seems that you are absolutely happy. Exactly, my master, said the dervish with a smile. Shah was surprised and asked, Why are you happy? Do you have any money? I don't have anything, my master. Maybe during the day a little bit will fall in for food. Do you have a home or a family? Neither this and nor that. I wander the world as the wind. Maybe then you have good health. Absolutely not, my master. From the cold of the night my bones ache, often and almost all of my teeth have fallen out. Well, what makes you so happy then? Tell me. Maybe your recipe for happiness will be useful to me. I have everything, but I am unhappy. God never sends more challenges for one person that he can't handle, and burdens a person only with those circumstances which at that moment are most useful for his development. The circumstances in which the person is the place for spiritualization. I accept that the best thing for me now is what I am, where I am, and what is happening with me. I accept it with gratitude and a smile, if necessary with resistance and patience, and if possible, I try to understand what God is trying to say to me with it, and in which direction should I move with my development. The realization of it doesn't make me absolutely happy, but I have a clear horizon opening in front of me, free from the rainy curtains and filled with the sunny light of awareness. Now, what did you guys think of this story? Right? You have this guy who seemingly has everything, and he's wandering around, he's going by, and he sees this guy who's just perpetually happy but has nothing and just wants to know his secret because it's so far from his reach, right? Now, how many of you guys can relate to this story? I certainly can. And I'm taking this class, and we're talking about world literature and how to analyze stories and really like delve into the character. So if you guys have any feedback of how you think you being in this position would change your life, or if you were in one of these characters, if you were the really happy guy that had nothing, or you were the other gentleman, the Shah, that didn't have as much happiness, how do you think you would learn to change that? Would you guys be just as curious to see what the secret is, or what keeps a smile on his face? And then the other important question, I think, is how long did it take for him to accept those things in his life? You know, was it a learned trait? Was it something that he was taught? Did he just find it over the course of time because time is our ultimate teacher? You know, did he have a mentor? You know, there's all these questions that we can ask ourselves, even about the first two poems that we talked, that I spoke to you guys about at the very beginning of this segment. You know, if we go with peace and we have a good heart and we make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, how does that attention to the self, the ego, the id, how does that really work in our subconscious layers to bring forth those things that we're trying to manifest or look at, right? You know, if we stop and we think about yes, and we listen to the things in our day, you know, the birds chirping, or somebody smiling at us from across the street, or a cute little puppy that ran across our path today that we got to pet, or the stranger that we got to buy a cup of coffee for, or the fact that we didn't have to walk miles for water for our family. You know, these small things can have huge, implaceable impacts. And I think, well, I can't say I think, but more awareness, I think, can definitely change those attributes, right? So if you guys have any comments, please feel free to message Facebook, Twitter. Let me know what you guys think. All right, and we've got one more inspirational story for this segment, guys. It's really more of a moral character story, but let's begin. A long time ago, there was a boy. He was smart, talented, and handsome. However, he was very selfish, and his temper was so difficult that nobody wanted to be friends with him. Often he got angry and said various hurtful things to people around him. The boy's parents, very concerned about his bad temper, they considered what they could do, and one day the father had an idea. He called his son and gave him a hammer and a bag of nails. The father said, "Every time you get angry, take a nail and drive it into that old fence as hard as you can." The fence was very tough, and the hammer was heavy. Nevertheless, the boy was so furious that during the very first day, he had driven 37 nails. Day after day, week after week, the number of nails was gradually decreasing. After some time, the boy started to understand that holding his temper is easier than driving nails into the fence. One day, the boy didn't need hammer and nails anymore, as he learned to hold his temper perfectly. So he came to his father and told about his achievement. Now every time when you hold your temper all day long, pull out one nail. Much time had passed. At last, the boy could be proud of himself, as all the nails were gone. When he came to his father and told about this, he offered to come and take a careful look at the fence. "You did a good job, my son, but pay attention to the holes that left from the nails. The fence will never be the same. The same happens when you say hurtful things to people. As your words leave scars in their hearts like those holes in the fence, remember we need to treat everyone with love and respect, because it doesn't matter that you say you're sorry. The scars will not disappear. Now, how incredible was that? That was such an amazing story because it's incredibly true. Words hurt, sometimes more than physical actions, and we must be careful about what we speak and who we speak it to, the tone of which we say it as well. So join us for our next segment, and we're going to get into some more inspirational quotes and stories and poems for you guys, and I can't wait to bring that to you. So join us on our next break. Thank you, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
All right, and thank you guys for joining me again. This is our next segment, and I want to get a little bit more in depth with some of these stories. I have 10 inspirational and successful people who did not let failure define them to read to you guys, but we'll probably only get through 5 of them. So let me know if you guys like any of these, or if there's anything on the podcast you'd like to hear about once we're done. So, everyone at home at some point in their lives has experienced failure. You know, it could be like not getting the job you want, messing up breakfast, getting bad marks on your report, or, you know, not getting the promotion that you wanted. But it's not what defines us, right? The failure. It's how we get back up after being hit. So we have a lot of good failure to success stories of some famous people all over the world. So these are all true, that will hopefully definitely help to inspire you on those days when you just have given up hope. So the first story is titled A Sports Star. Once, a young schoolboy was caught in a fire accident in his school and was assumed that he would not live. His mother was told that he was sure to die, for the terrible fire had devastated the lower half of his body. Even if he were to survive, he would be a cripple throughout his life. But the brave boy did not want to die, nor did he want to be a cripple. Much to the amazement of the doctor, he did survive. But unfortunately, from his waist down, he had no motor ability. His thin legs just dangled there, lifeless. Ultimately, he was discharged from the hospital, but his determination to walk was indomitable. Side note, that's probably one of my favorite words to say. Indomitable. Okay, moving on. At home, when he was not in bed, he was confined to a wheelchair. One day, he threw himself from the chair and pulled himself across the grass, dragging his legs behind him. He reached the picket fence, raised himself up, and then stake by stake, he began dragging himself along the fence, his resolve to walk undeterred. He did this every day, with faith in himself that he would be able to walk unaided. With his iron persistence and his resolute determination, he did develop the ability to stand up, then to walk haltingly, then to walk by himself, and then to run. He began to walk to school, then run to school, to run for the sheer joy of running. Later in college, he made the track team. And in February of 1934, in New York City's famous Madison Square Garden, this young man who was not expected to survive, who would surely never walk, who could never hope to run, this determined young man, Dr. Glenn Cunningham, ran the world's fastest mile. An epitome of the power of positive thinking and faith in oneself, Glenn Cunningham continues to be an inspiration for many, and his story a brilliant testimony to how one can bounce back even when all odds are stacked against one, to the extent that death seems to be the preferable option. Our next story is titled Entrepreneur. He had a troubled childhood. His parents separated, and his stepfather was physically abusive to his mother and siblings. His mother was falsely convicted twice because of his stepfather's allegations. Because they had no one to take care of them, he, along with his siblings, had to stay in a foster home at the age of 8. His first marriage failed partly due to his choice of opting out of medical career and because he cheated on his wife. Not only did he fail miserably at his job as a medical equipment salesman, but his girlfriend also deserted him due to his deteriorating financial conditions. Homeless, he stayed with his son at motels, parks, airports, and once even in a public toilet. He toiled incessantly at a brokerage firm during the daytime, stood in long queues so as to sleep under a roof at night, and after passing the licensing exam in 1982, he became a full-time employee of Dean Witter. He established his own brokerage firm, Gardner Rich & Co., in 1987, in which he owns 75% of the stock. He sold a small stake in Gardner Rich in 2006 in a multi-million-dollar deal. He is none other than Chris Gardner, the CEO and founder of Christopher Gardner International Holdings. With offices in San Francisco, New York, and Chicago, his life was portrayed in a Hollywood film, The Pursuit of Happiness, which not only went on to be a blockbuster, but was also loved by audiences worldwide. Our third story is about an Indian hockey player. He is an Indian professional field hockey player and an ex-captain of the Indian national team. He made his international debut in January of 2004 in Sultan Azlan Shah Cup in Kuala Lumpur. I'm so sorry to anybody if I mispronounce that. He took over as the captain of the Indian national team in January of 2009. At a time when he was at his peak, he was said to have the best speed in the world in drag flick, which was roughly the speed of 145 kilometers an hour. Now, on the 22nd of August of 2006, Singh was seriously injured after being hit by an accidental gunshot in Shahdabadi train. I think that's supposed to say on Shahdabadi train, but it says in, so I apologize. While on his way to join the national team due to leave for the World Cup in Germany 2 days later, he was almost paralyzed and on a wheelchair for 2 years of his life. Sandeep Singh Binder not only recovered from that serious injury, but also established himself again in the team. Under his captaincy, the Indian team managed to clinch the Sultan Azlan Shah Cup in 2009 after defeating Malaysia in the finals at Ipoh. India won the title after a long wait of 13 years. Singh was also the top goal scorer of the tournament. Now, the Indians' men's national hockey team had qualified for the 2012 Summer Olympics in London after a gap of 8 years. The team had a resounding victory over France in the finals of the Olympic qualifiers by beating France 8-1. Ace drag flicker Singh starred in the final against France by scoring 5 goals, including a hat trick, all from penalty corners, 19th, 26th, 38th, 49th, and 51st minutes. Singh was the highest scorer of the Olympic qualifiers tournament by scoring 16 goals. And he's still regarded as one of the best drag flickers of the game. Now, our next story is about a wildlife presenter. Some of you may know, some not. I'm somewhat familiar with. So, after leaving school, he briefly considered joining the Indian Army and hiked in the Himalayan mountains of Sikkim and West Bengal. Eventually, he joined the Territorial Army and, after passing selection, served as a reservist with the SAS in 21 SAS Regiment Artist Reserve for 3 years until 1997. In 1996, he suffered a free-fall parachuting accident in Zambia. His canopy ripped at 16,000 feet, partially opening, causing him to fall and land on his parachute pack on his back, which partially crushed 3 vertebrae. He later said, "I should have cut the main parachute and gone to the reserve, but thought there was time to resolve the problem." According to his surgeon, he came within a whisker of being paralyzed for life, and at first it was questionable whether he would ever walk again. He spent the next 12 months in and out of military rehabilitation. And in a showcase of what pure determination and hard work can do, on the 16th of May 1998, he achieved his childhood dream, climbed to the summit of Mount Everest 18 months after breaking 3 vertebrae in a parachuting accident. And at 23, he was at the time among the youngest people to have achieved this feat. This is the inspirational story of the amazing Bear Grylls, who is known to the world as a television presenter for the Discovery Channel with his own show called Man vs. Wild. I think we have time for 1 or 2 more. So in the middle of 2009, this gentleman was the software engineer that no one wanted to hire. Despite a dozen years of experience at Yahoo and Apple Computer, he got turned down by 2 of the internet's most upcoming companies at the time. First Twitter and then Facebook. When he could not find any other company that would hire him, he teamed up with another Yahoo alum, Jan Koum, and built the application that has not only dominated cloud-based messaging, but is also used all over the world. Yes, this person is none other than Brian Acton, who developed WhatsApp. WhatsApp was acquired by Facebook in 2014 for about $19 billion in U.S. cash and stock, making Acton's net worth about $3.8 billion. So that was 5 stories, and I don't know about you guys, but I am so inspired listening to these people, and it makes me want to work out more. It makes me want to do stuff more with my life and just get out there and not be defeated by anything, right? I'm so inspired. So I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more for this segment. Now, this film star first gained popularity in the early 1970s. So total was his dominance of the movie scene in the 1970s and 80s that the French director François Truffaut called him a one-man industry. But there came a time when a number of his films, which released consecutively, failed at the box office, and just a few years later, his production house tanked, eventually led to its financial and operational collapse in 1997. However, he soon made a comeback, and as of 2015 is still one of the most bankable, successful, and respected stars all over the world. This person is no other than the incredible Amitabh Bachchan. I really hope I pronounced that. Respect. He has played a range of characters and received critical acclaim for many of them. The recent movie Piku is still earning him nods of approval from all over the world. He is currently 72 years old and proves that age is no barrier. All right, and now I have for you guys an American rock climber, engineer, and biophysicist. Yes, that is everything that this guy has done, and probably not enough things. I'm sure there's more. So he was a prodigy rock climber. By age 8, he had scaled the face of the 11,627-foot Mount Temple in the Canadian Rockies. By 17, he was acknowledged to be one of the best climbers in the United States. In January of 1982, after having ascended a difficult technical ice route in Huntington Ravine on Mount Washington in New Hampshire, Hare and a fellow climber, Jeff Batzer, were caught in a blizzard and became disoriented, ultimately descending into the Great Gulf, where they passed 3 nights in negative 29 degrees Celsius temperatures. By the time they were rescued, the climbers had suffered severe frostbite. Both of Hare's legs had to be amputated below the knee. His companion lost his lower left leg, the toes on his right foot, and the fingers on his right hand. While a postdoctoral fellow at MIT in biomedical devices, he began working on advanced leg prosthesis and orthosis, devices that emulate the functionality of the human leg. Using specialized prosthesis that he designed, he created prosthetic feet with high toe stiffness that made it possible to stand on small rock edges the width of a coin, and titanium spiked feet that assisted him in ascending steep ice walls. He used these prosthesis to alter his height to avoid awkward body positions and to grab the hand and footholds previously out of reach. His height could range from 5 to 8 feet. As a result of using the prosthesis, Hare climbed at a more advanced level than he had before the accident, making him the first person with a major amputation to perform in a sport on par with elite-level able-bodied persons. How incredible is that? Imagine you're living your best life and these accidents happen and none of these people let it stop them. I mean, they may have been upset at a point, they may have been disheartened, but they carried on and they continued to strive for the things that they believed in and what they were passionate about. And I think we can all learn a little bit from these. Stay tuned for our next segment.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Guys, so we've talked a lot so far and listened to a lot of incredible stories, some with very deep inspirational messages, some that are gratifying and they have innumerable amount of life struggles. And honestly, I think the variety is so amazing. So let's get into a couple poems here and then we'll segue into a few short stories as well, shall we? So this is a lovely poem by Krista O'Reilly David Digue, something. Very close. It's Digui. So, again, I'm trying not to butcher names, but hopefully it's not too terrible. So, she writes, "Fear is loud and bossy. She can be vicious at times. And the worst of it is that she often mingles truth with fiction. But you must learn to challenge the stories she feeds you. You get to be the boss of your thoughts. You can learn to question whether or not everything she tells you is truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Since you have done the work to deepen self-awareness and self-compassion, when she throws all your past failings in your face, you won't crumble, because you already know you are imperfect, and you are beautiful and resilient and worthy of a budding and thoughtfully crafted life. And that was from her book, A Life in Progress. And according to sources, she actually wrote this after her mom died to cope with that grief. And I'm sure on some level we can all understand that as well. An amazing thing happens when you get honest with yourself and start doing what you love, what makes you happy. You stop wishing for the weekend. You stop merely looking forward to special events. You begin to live in each moment and you start feeling like a human being. You just ride the wave that is life with this feeling of contentment and joy. You move fluidly, steadily, calm and grateful. A veil is lifted and a whole new perspective is born. That amazing poem was by an author that is unknown. And I think we can all be a little bit grateful for those statements to relate to our lives and the introspectives that we try to weave in each day. This next poem might be a little bit well known. It's by Ralph Waldo Emerson. To laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even one life has breathed easier because you have lived, this is to have succeeded. How inspiring is that? That poem. You know, he's saying it doesn't take much. It's sometimes a very minimal effort to achieve something so wonderful and so natural that your definition of success and what it can truly mean can differ incredibly, right? And again, it's still not the same for everybody, so it is interesting, isn't it? To think that sometimes it's always the small things and not the bigger things that we initially think we crave or that we dream about. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's often the smaller moments that teach us more about life. Now, coming up later, we do have some really great uplifting and feel-good stories I want to read to you. But for now, I want to get into a few of these other smaller stories. This one is actually called The Elephant Rope. So, a gentleman was walking through an elephant camp, and he spotted that the elephants weren't being kept in cages or held by the use of chains. All that was holding them back from escaping the camp was a small piece of rope tied to one of their legs. As the man gazed upon the elephants, he was completely confused as to why the elephants didn't just use their strength to break the rope and escape the camp. They could easily have done so, but instead they didn't try at all. Curious and wanting to know the answer, he asked a trainer nearby why the elephants were just standing there and never tried to escape. The trainer replied, "When they are very young and much smaller, we use the same size rope to tie them, and at that age, it's enough to hold them. As they grow up, they are conditioned to believe they cannot break away. They believe the rope can still hold them, so they never try to break free." And how many times have you gotten into a position or a fight or something with your family, or an idea has popped in your head and you thought, oh, this isn't good enough, I can never do it, I'll never succeed, I'll never be better than this is all there is for me. And had these poor little elephants realized that there wasn't much holding them back, they could have continued to run around and be successful and achieve impossible things. But the important step is to really believe that you can do it. This next story is, I think, really interesting, and it's titled Thinking Out of the Box. It really kind of showcases how, even though you think you can be in a situation that you don't want to be in, there might still be a way to achieve a good ending and one that can actually make you happy, right? So, in a small Italian town, hundreds of years ago, a small business owner owed a large sum of money to a loan shark. The loan shark was very old, unattractive-looking guy that just so happened to fancy the business owner's daughter. He decided to offer the businessman a deal that would completely wipe out the debt he owed him. However, the catch was that he would only wipe out the debt if he could marry the businessman's daughter. Needless to say, this proposal was met with a look of disgust. Now, the loan shark said that he would place two pebbles into a bag, one white and one black. The daughter would then have to reach into the bag and pick out a pebble. If it was black, the debt would be wiped, but the loan shark would then marry her. If it was white, the debt would also be wiped, but the daughter wouldn't have to marry the loan shark. Standing on a pebble-strewn path in the businessman's garden, the loan shark bent over and picked up two pebbles. Whilst he was picking them up, the daughter noticed that he'd picked up two black pebbles and placed them both in the bag. He then asked the daughter to reach into the bag and pick one. The daughter naturally had three choices as to what she could have done. She could refuse to pick a pebble from the bag. She could take both pebbles out of the bag and expose the loan shark for cheating. Or she could pick a pebble from the bag, fully well knowing it was black, and sacrifice herself for her father's freedom. So she drew out a pebble from the bag, and before looking at it, accidentally dropped it into the midst of the other pebbles. She said to the loan shark, "Oh, how clumsy of me. Never mind. If you look into the bag for the one that is left, you'll be able to tell which pebble I picked." The pebble left in the bag is obviously black, and seeing as the loan shark didn't want to be exposed, he had to play along as if the pebble the daughter dropped was white and clear her father's debt. Now what do you guys think is the moral of this story? Right? It's kind of surreal, you know, you have this guy that you owe money to that you think is going to be a little bit honorable, but decides to cheat the system. And you have a poor woman that's about to be sent off to a marriage that nobody wanted, according to the story, right? And yet she is able to, even though faced with initial choices, able to find an additional one that didn't occur to her at all at first. So the moral of the story is always possible to overcome a tough situation with out-of-the-box thinking and not give in to the only options you think you have to pick from. Okay. This next story is about a group of frogs who are super adorable. And real quick diatribe, right? So I'm out walking my dog the other day, and he's like sniffing around in the grass, and it's a little bit higher. We haven't mowed the lawn yet or anything, and there's this little frog that just keeps hopping, right? And so my dog starts going after it, and he's trying to like touch it and sniff it and like investigate like dogs do. And what does this poor dog do? He actually licks the toad, and I did pull him away very quickly, but it was a little bit adorable. Like he just wanted to play with it and see what was happening, you know. But now, at any rate, I digress. So to the story. As a group of frogs was traveling through the woods, two of them fell into a deep pit. When the other frogs crowded around the pit and saw how deep it was, they told the two frogs that there was no hope left for them. However, the two frogs decided to ignore what the others were saying, and they proceeded to try and jump out of the pit. Despite their efforts, the group of frogs at the top of the pit were still saying that they should just give up, that they would never make it out. Eventually, one of the frogs took heed to what the others were saying, and he gave up, falling down to his death. The other frog continued to jump as hard as he could, Again, the crowd of frogs yelled at him to stop the pain and just die. He jumped even harder and finally made it out. When he got out, the other frogs said, "Did you not hear us?" The frog explained to them that he was deaf. He thought they were encouraging him the entire time. The moral of this story would be that people's words can have an effect on others' lives. And just like the poem we learned from earlier, we have to really think about what we say before it comes out of our mouth. Just as the boy who was putting nails into the fence, it might be the difference between life and death. It might be the difference between hurting someone's feelings and having an amazing friendship or relationship. It might be the difference between feeling better or feeling worse. It might be the difference in any small number of ways. I think we have one more time. I think we have time for one more quick story for this segment. And when we go on to our last segment of today's podcast episode, we are going to get in a couple really good stories and maybe one really amazing poem at the end of it. Once, an old man and a young man were sitting on the shore of a wild and stormy river. "Master," the student asked, "why does the time flow straight, but always ripples, either slowing down to a complete stop or racing like a cow with a thistle under her tail?" The teacher looked at the seething water and answered, "You see, there are a few large stones in the river and a lot of small pebbles. Imagine that the river is your life. If you will only rejoice over big occasions, like your wedding that will happen next month, or like a new baby that you will have after 1 year, or a new business that you will start after 5 years, then you will cross your life in a few jumps, like jumping from one stone to another. Otherwise, if you will move in small paces over the pebbles, taking joy in small things, a sunny day, the beauty of autumn forest, a good conversation, then later looking back at your life, you won't see 10 big stones, but lots of your own traces, and each of them you will be able to remember with a happy smile, and you will see that the road that you have crossed is much longer. But teacher, when I love or when I do the work that I like, or when I have a talk with friends, the time flies fast, but the time drags so long when I'm hurt, when I'm afraid, or when I feel lonely." "You see," the old man answered wistfully, "this is what it should be. When we are unhappy, we don't live, but we only exist. So the time lies still in our wallets, and only for our happiness we pay the ringing coin of time that we still have left." And that is incredibly beautiful, and very well written, and very well put. And the analogy is incredibly accurate as well. And I'm sure we can all relate, and I can't.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Okay, everyone, we are on our last segment for today's podcast. If you joined us this far, thank you so much for being here with me today. I hope that you've learned some things. I hope you've been able to relax a little bit and maybe get some open perspective, clear your mind, come out with some renewed gratitude. And speaking of time, since we're almost out of time, I'd like to actually read you a story about one of those before we continue our other conversations. And this story begins, one day a wise man was asked a question. What is time? His answer was, yesterday, today, tomorrow. The one who asked the question was disappointed. That's it. Well, the wise man said, then listen to this story. There was a today. I apologize. Let me refresh. There was today, which wanted to become always, yesterday said. I always wanted to become always when I was you. Did you ask always how it does that? Inquired today. I asked, and? By changing, was its answer. By becoming tomorrow from today. But that means, today thought, that always does not belong to itself. It is always someone else. It means that something is making it do that. But what is it? Yesterday said, maybe it's time. What is time? Today asked. It's only you and me. And also tomorrow. The one who was asking the wise man said nothing more, because another person who was silent before joined their conversation. But wise man, it seems that time is the thing what passes, and that is wrong. It can also last by stopping. The wise man looked at him with curiosity and answered with a smile. You are right. Sometimes today can last hundreds and thousands of years before it passes. Sometimes it feels like yesterday has come back and we are living in it. There is a little bit of tomorrow in yesterday and in today, but we rarely recognize it. It turns out that there is only this Trinity. Now, how amazing was that story? How were you able to wrap your head around it? Were you able to understand what they were saying of time and tomorrow and today? I hope so. And when we think about that, and we think about what passes and what doesn't, and how time interacts with us, we also have to think about our sense of self and strength and our self-acceptance. And from Sylvester McNutt III came this poem. I am not for everyone. I know my truth. I know who I am. I know what I do and do not bring to the table. I am not easy to deal with, but I do bring tons of value. I bring love and strength, but I am not perfect, and if I don't fit in with a person or group, that is okay with me. And when we're thinking about time, we also think about songs, and when we hear them on the radio, memories that they bring to us, or feelings that we had when we heard them, or different scents and senses. And some of the best poems about life are songs, such as this one from Regina Spektor, titled On the Radio. This is how it works. You're young until you're not. You love until you don't. You try until you can't. You laugh until you cry. You cry until you laugh. And everyone must breathe until their dying breath. No, this is how it works. You peer inside yourself. You take the things you like and try to love the things you took, and then you take that love you made and stick it in someone else's heart, pumping someone else's blood and walking arm in arm. You hope it don't get harmed, but even if it does, you'll just do it all again. And if that means never having give up, and if that means pursuing love and pursuing better and pursuing more and pursuing what truly elates you, I don't think you could go wrong. And I'd like to read you another story about a farmer and a baker. There was a farmer who sold a pound of butter to a baker. One day the baker decided to weigh the butter to see if he was getting the right amount, which he wasn't. Angry about this, he took the farmer to court. The judge asked the farmer if he was using any measure to weigh the butter. The farmer replied, "Honor, I'm primitive. I don't have a proper measure, but I do have a scale." The judge asked, "Then how do you weigh the butter?" The farmer replied, "Your Honor, long before the baker started buying butter from me, I have been buying a pound loaf of bread from him. Every day when the baker brings the bread, I put it on the scale and give him the same weight in butter. If anyone is to be blamed, it is the baker." And what's the moral of this story? Well, it's more simply that in life you get what you give, and we should try not to cheat others. Which means that even other obstacles in our path, like opportunity, we can learn that in ancient times, a king had a boulder placed on a roadway. He then hid himself and watched to see if anyone would move the boulder out of the way. Some of the king's wealthiest merchants and courtiers came by and simply walked around it. Many people loudly blamed the king for not keeping the roads clear, but none of them did anything about getting the stone out of the way. A peasant then came along carrying a load of vegetables. Upon approaching the boulder, the peasant laid down his burden and tried to push the stone out of the road. After much pushing and straining, he finally succeeded. After the peasant went back to pick up his vegetables, he noticed a purse lying in the road where the boulder had been. The purse contained many gold coins and a note from the king explaining that the gold was for the person who removed the boulder from the roadway. And from this story we can learn that every obstacle we come across in life gives us an opportunity to improve our circumstances, and whilst the lazy complain and the others are creating opportunities through their kind hearts, generosity, and willingness to get things done. And I have this amazing other story. We'll do a couple more here about a blind girl. She hated herself purely for the fact she was blind. The only person she didn't hate was her loving boyfriend, as he was always there for her. She said that if she could only see the world, she would marry him. One day, someone donated a pair of eyes to her. Now she could see everything, including her boyfriend. Her boyfriend asked her, "Now that you can see the world, will you marry me?" The girl was shocked when she saw that her boyfriend was blind too, and refused to marry him. Her boyfriend walked away in tears and later wrote a letter to her, saying, "Just take care of my eyes, dear." When our circumstances change, so does our mind. Some people may not be able to see the way things were before, and might not be able to appreciate them. There are many things to take away from this story, though, and not just one. There are two more stories I'd like to read for you guys today. One is about puppies, and then we'll close with a poem. A shop owner placed a sign above his door that said, "Puppies for sale." Signs like this always have a way of attracting young children, and to no surprise, a boy saw the sign and approached the owner. "How much are you going to sell the puppies for?" he asked. The store owner replied, "Anywhere from $30 to $50. The little boy pulled out some change from his pocket. "I have $2.37, he said. "Can I please look at them?" The shop owner smiled and whistled. Out of the kennel came Lady, who ran down the aisle of the shop, followed by 5 teeny tiny balls of fur. One puppy was lagging considerably behind. Immediately the little boy singled out the lagging, limping puppy and said, "What's wrong with that little dog?" The shop owner explained that the veterinarian had examined the little puppy and had discovered it didn't have a hip socket. It would always limp. It would always be lame. The little boy became excited. "That is the puppy I want to buy." The shop owner said, "No, you don't want to buy that little dog. If you really want him, I'll just give him to you." The little boy got quite upset. He looked straight into the store owner's eyes, pointing his finger, and said, "I don't want you to give him to me. That little dog is worth every bit as much as all the other dogs, and I'll pay full price. In fact, I'll give you $2.37 now and 50 cents a month until I have paid for him." The shop owner countered, "You really don't want to buy this little dog. He's never going to be able to run and jump and play with you like the other puppies." To his surprise, the little boy reached down and rolled up his pant leg to reveal a badly twisted, crippled left leg, supported by a big metal brace. He looked up at the shop owner and softly replied, "Well, I don't run so well myself, and the little puppy will need someone who understands." And I almost want to cry just reading that, because it's so adorable and heartbreaking at the same time. Like, you never really know about anything. And you just want to kind of assume things, and oftentimes the things we try to do are more generous and more loving and giving than what we had initially imagined. One of the last stories I'll read to you is called Box Full of Kisses. Some time ago, a man punished his 3-year-old daughter for wasting a roll of gold wrapping paper. Money was tight, and he became infuriated when the child tried to decorate a box to put under the Christmas tree. Nevertheless, the little girl brought the gift to her father the next morning and said, "This is for you, Daddy." The man became embarrassed by his overreaction earlier, but his rage continued when he saw the box was empty. He yelled at her, "Don't you know when you give someone a present, there's supposed to be something inside?" The little girl looked up at him with tears in her eyes and cried, "Daddy, it's not empty at all. I blew kisses into the box. They're all for you, Daddy." The father was crushed. He put his arms around his little girl and he begged for her forgiveness. Only a short time later, an accident took the life of the child. Her father kept the gold box by his bed for many years, and whenever he was discouraged, he would take out an imaginary kiss and remember the love of the child who put it there. And this story itself shows us that love is the most precious gift in the world. It's not just about the time we spend with people and the things that we have and the successes that we build or the money in our bank account. It's entirely about the people that we love and who choose to love us back with all of their heart. Now, I'd like to close out with a poem by Robert Frost called "The Road Not Taken." The 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down on one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, then took the other as just as fair. And having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I should be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And this really speaks to the big noble question of how to make a difference in the world. And on the first read, it tells us that the choice one really makes does matter, and ending that he took the one less traveled. Upon a closer choice, it reveals that the lonely choice that was made earlier may be one that was more significant. I guess we'll never really know, because it's to each person's road. I'd like to thank you guys for joining me today, and thank you for listening to the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps. And always, let us be happy.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.